She spent 10 years dancing with giants. Elise Moreau, a world-renowned orca trainer, was celebrated for her calm presence and her almost mystical connection to the ocean's top predator. But on one blistering June afternoon, before hundreds of stunned spectators, her dream life turned into a nightmare. What you're about to hear is as real as it is haunting, and it might change the way you think about marine parks forever. 3 truths before we begin. Elise Moreau was considered one of the best trainers in the world. Kayla, the orca she trusted with her life, had a violent past the public never saw. And what happened next didn't just end a life, it sparked a reckoning that could end an entire industry. This is the terrifying last moments of orca trainer Elise Moreau. From a young age, Elise Moreau felt more at home near the sea than anywhere else. Born in the small fishing town of Douarnenez, along the jagged coastlines of Brittany, France, she would sit for hours on the rocks, eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a glimpse of a dorsal fin. She wasn't drawn to fairy tales or fashion or fame. She was drawn to something wilder, something bigger. In the margins of her school books, she didn't doodle hearts. She sketched orcas, majestic, terrifying, beautiful. At 19, Elise packed a single suitcase, boarded a plane to the United States, and began the long, quiet climb toward her dream. She scrubbed algae from tank walls at 4 a.m. She hauled slimy buckets of mackerel under the blistering California sun. She shadowed seasoned trainers who rarely acknowledged her, but she watched, she listened, and the orcas noticed her. Elise had a gift, something that couldn't be taught. Where others saw simple behaviors, she saw emotion. Where others forced obedience, she built trust. It was said that she could predict an orca's mood before the animal even surfaced, that she could stop a tantrum with a whisper. She didn't dominate the animals. She danced with them. By 34, Elise wasn't just another trainer. She was the face of Blue Sea Sanctuary, a state-of-the-art marine park nestled into the sun-drenched cliffs of Santa Cruz. Every afternoon, families packed the stadium to see Harmony of the Deep, a breathtaking performance that blended classical music, synchronized swimming, and the raw power of the ocean's fiercest predator. In those moments, something magical happened. It wasn't just entertainment, it felt like communion. To the world, Elise Moreau was fearless, graceful, untouchable. But behind the scenes, things weren't always so perfect. Her bond with Kayla, the park's largest orca, was legendary. Weighing over 6,000 pounds and stretching 22 feet long, Kayla was both breathtaking and unpredictable. She was known for dramatic breaches and sudden mood shifts. Yet Elise believed in her. She often said, "Kayla isn't dangerous. She's misunderstood." To her, Kayla wasn't just an animal. She was a partner, a soul. What few people knew was that Kayla had been transferred multiple times between facilities. She'd been separated from companions. She'd lost a calf. She had scars on her body, some visible, some not. And over time, something began to change. The eye contact lingered just a bit longer. The movements grew sharper. The surface smiles from the staff grew thinner. But Elise brushed off the concerns. She believed trust was enough, that if she just showed more love, more patience, the danger would dissolve. She had no idea that her final performance was only days away, and that the bond she believed would protect her would be the very thing that would break. Kayla wasn't born in a marine park. She was born wild, free, off the icy coast of Kamchatka, Russia, in 1995. One morning, the ocean surface erupted with engine noise. Boats closed in, nets dropped like shadows. There was panic, confusion, screams. Yes, orcas scream. In minutes, she was separated from her mother, her pod, her home, lifted by cranes, lowered into silence. Kayla was just a juvenile, barely weaned, and in a single day, her world shrank from thousands of miles to a fiberglass tank. They called it acquisition, but what it really was abduction. Over the next 2 decades, Kayla would be transferred 5 times across 3 countries, always adapting, always watched. She learned to perform, to bow on cue, to paint with her tongue. But behind the routines was a growing fracture. Internal reports described her as moody but manageable. But there were patterns no one could ignore. She refused food for days. She floated motionless, ignoring calls. She once struck a wall so hard during a show that the glass shuddered. And in 2007, she tail-slapped a trainer with such force it shattered two of his ribs. That report, buried under trainer error, but Blue Sea Sanctuary saw something else. A star. Kayla was massive, over 6,000 pounds of pure muscle. She was striking, black and white perfection. She was ticket gold. And most importantly, she connected with Elise. That bond was real, deep, tangible. For years it worked. Elise spoke. Kayla responded. They danced, they dove, they dazzled. But the cracks were forming. In her final year, subtle shifts began to surface. Delayed behaviors, missed cues. She would linger just beneath the surface, staring. Jaw popping, a known sign of orca irritation, was dismissed as post-show energy. Elise wrote it off as fatigue. She's just having an off day, she'd say, but she'll bounce back. She always does. But not everyone agreed. There was tension. She wasn't herself. She held her rostrum lower than usual. And the water, when she swam, it felt heavier, like she was dragging something invisible. James raised concerns. He brought his notes, his footage. He warned Elise, she's holding something back. I don't think she's safe right now. But Elise didn't want to hear it. I know her, she replied, better than anyone. And she did know her. But love, real love, can blind us. It can make us ignore the signs that are screaming right in front of us. It can convince us that danger wears a familiar face. Kayla wasn't angry. She was unraveling. Not because of Elise, but because of everything the world had taken from her. And soon, that storm would break. June 12th was a scorcher, the kind of day where heat clings to your skin and the sky feels too bright to be safe. It was the 10-year anniversary of Elise and Kayla's partnership, an event the park had spent weeks preparing for. More than 800 spectators crowded into the stands, their faces painted with sunscreen and excitement. Vendors sold souvenir plushies, the speakers blared orchestral music, banners waved in the breeze. A decade of trust, Elise and Kayla. This wasn't just another show. It was a celebration, a love letter to everything they had built together. Elise seemed calm, focused, but one staff member later recalled her standing by the tank longer than usual that morning, watching Kayla. She was just still, they said, not aggressive, not excited, just still, like the ocean before a storm. 2 p.m. showtime. Elise stepped onto the platform in her black wetsuit, hand raised high as the opening chords of Harmony of the Deep filled the air. Kayla was supposed to enter on cue, bursting through the water in a choreographed spiral that would send a wave over the front row. But nothing. No splash, no breach, no movement at all. Just a dark, unmoving shadow under the surface. She signaled again, this time with both hands. Still, Kayla didn't move. Then, slowly, the orca began to rise. Her massive dorsal fin broke the surface, gliding toward Elise with eerie grace. But instead of diving beneath her for the lift, a move they'd done hundreds of times, Kayla brushed past her trainer's legs with a chilling, deliberate glide. Elise said, "She's feeling playful today, huh?" The crowd laughed. Some clapped. No one knew what was coming. Not yet. Elise turned, preparing for the next maneuver. She tapped her hand against the water, a cue for Kayla to surface beside her. But this time, Kayla surged forward without waiting. Not in performance, not in play, in silence. What happened next? Silenced the entire stadium. It wasn't part of the show. There was no choreography, no music, only a sudden, violent thrash of water and a scream. Without warning, Kayla surged from below. Her massive body hit Elise with the force of a wrecking ball, knocking her clean off the platform. She hit the water hard. At first, people thought it was a stunt, a miscue, a slip. But the illusion shattered the moment Kayla's jaws locked around Elise's arm. Not a playful grip, not rehearsal. This was intentional. Gas rippled through the audience as Elise was dragged under, her legs kicking, her hand reaching toward the light. Blood and bubbles rose together, painting the surface pink. The trainers launched into emergency protocol. Distraction buoys, ignored. Hand slaps on the surface, unnoticed. Kayla wasn't responding to commands. She wasn't responding to anything. She was somewhere else. Elise surfaced briefly, only for a moment, gasping for air, her face contorted in agony, eyes filled with the raw, primal terror of someone who knows. This might be the end. Elise screamed, "Help!" That was the last word anyone heard her speak. Then, she was yanked back under, this time with such force it created a whirlpool of red. Kayla thrashed her body like a predator with prey, hurling Elise through the water, dragging her limbs, cracking her bones. Then, silence. Only to explode again, Kayla bursting upward, launching Elise's limp body into the air like a rag doll. She soared, then fell, crashing back into the pool with a sickening slap. The crowd was no longer watching a show. They were watching a woman die, and there was nothing they could do. Elise's body surfaced again, barely moving, her wetsuit torn, limbs twisted, streaks of red swirling in the current. The trainers screamed her name. One dove in, desperate, risking everything. Others pulled him back, because Kayla wasn't finished. She circled, slowly, her eye breaking the surface, watching. In less than 2 minutes, the impossible had happened. A decade of trust, love, and performance had been torn apart in front of hundreds of witnesses. What was once beautiful had shattered, and no one, no child, no parent, no trainer could pretend it was just a show anymore. This was a reckoning. The show was over, but no one clapped. No one moved. For a moment, the stadium was locked in the stunned paralysis. 800 souls frozen in disbelief, staring at a pool that had turned from stage into crime scene. Then came the screams. Then came the chaos. Park staff and security swept through the aisles, urgently but gently, guiding families out. "No running," they said. "Please don't look back." Some children were crying, others were silent, too young to understand, too old to ever forget. Behind the walls of Blue Sea Sanctuary, hidden from public view, medics fought to bring Elise back. Chest compressions, oxygen, defibrillators. But her body was broken, her ribs shattered, her lungs flooded, her arm nearly severed. The medical team did everything they could. But it was too late. At 2:47 p.m., Elise Moreau, world-class trainer, beloved friend, ocean dreamer, was pronounced dead. She had entered the water to perform a ballet. She never resurfaced alive. In the hours that followed, silence settled over the park. No music, no announcements, just the low whir of filtration pumps and the muffled sobs of co-workers who had just lost one of their own. The gates were sealed. Guests were told the park was closed for maintenance. But inside, something deeper had ruptured. The trainers, some of whom had worked alongside Elise for years, sat in shock, many still in wetsuits, staring at the water as if it might give them an answer. Kayla had been moved to the medical pool. She was quiet, calm, unbothered. That day, headlines around the world would read, "Trainer killed by captive orca during live show." But to those who knew her, to those who watched it unfold, it was more than a headline. It was a heartbreak, a betrayal, a brutal reminder of the line between wild and tame. And as the sun dipped low over Santa Cruz that evening, one question began to echo behind the locked doors of Blue Sea. How could this happen? And more importantly, why did no one stop it? Within hours of Elise's death, the walls of Blue Sea Sanctuary were no longer guarding a secret. They were sealing in a scandal. Teams from OSHA, animal welfare agencies, and independent marine biologists arrived on site. What began as a routine safety probe quickly unraveled into a damning investigation. Documents began leaking, emails, training logs, internal memos. Each one painted a picture far darker than the public had ever seen. For years, Kayla had exhibited dangerous behaviors. Repeated lunges at trainers, refusals to perform, prolonged float states, and frequent jaw popping, a well-known sign of stress and aggression in captive orcas. But instead of pulling her from shows, the records showed a disturbing trend. Cover up, rebrand, minimize. One internal email, dated just 6 months before the attack, read, "Too valuable to sideline her. We'll monitor." Elise can handle her. She's the only one who can. Kayla wasn't just a performer. She was a profit engine. Her image was stamped on merchandise. Her jumps filled seats. And Elise was trusted to keep the machine running. As the truth seeped into daylight, so did the voices of those who had once stayed silent. A former trainer, his identity protected, told a reporter, "Kayla wasn't just acting out, she was unraveling. But every time we raised a concern, we were told to adjust the show, not the whale." Others described a culture of silence, a place where questioning management meant losing hours, where protecting the illusion of harmony mattered more than protecting the humans behind it. The public response was immediate, and it was furious. Social media exploded with outrage. Former guests posted clips of Elise's final shows, analyzing her every movement, looking for signs they missed. Parents who had taken their children to Blue Sea were horrified. Animal rights groups mobilized. Justice for Elise began trending within 24 hours. Lawsuits were filed, petitions launched, and behind closed doors, executives scrambled. This wasn't just a workplace tragedy. This was a system failing in plain sight. A billion-dollar illusion cracking under its own weight. And as investigators dug deeper, they would uncover something even more unsettling. Elise had voiced concerns about Kayla, but no one listened, because they believed in the myth, more than the woman who lived inside it. The news ignited a firestorm. Across the country, protesters gathered outside marine parks holding candles, flowers, and signs soaked by rain and grief. Their voices were raw with sorrow and rage. Justice for Elise! She trusted the system, and it betrayed her. Online, a storm of hashtags swept through every platform. Free Kayla, Justice for Elise, never again. People who had never stepped foot in Blue Sea were now questioning what they thought they knew. Elise's family released pages from her private journal, words that felt like a cry from beyond the grave. One entry read, "Kayla looks at me with sadness now. I don't know if it's me she's angry with, or the world." Another whispered, "If I can't reach her, maybe no one can." Her words haunted those who read them. In Sacramento, lawmakers convened an emergency session. The Orca Protection Act, once considered radical, was now urgent. It proposed a full ban on orca breeding and performances in the state of California. News anchors choked up. Former trainers came forward. Parents canceled family trips. Sponsors withdrew support. And at the gates of Blue Sea Sanctuary, a sea of candles lit up the night. One sign stood out in flickering light. She gave her heart to the ocean, and the system drowned her. What began as a performance ended as a reckoning. Elise's story didn't just expose one park. It cracked open an industry. And once the silence was broken, there was no going back. After Elise's death, everything changed. Kayla never performed again. The music stopped. The crowds faded. The spotlight, once so bright, now cast only shadows. Trainers were ordered to stay out of the water. The pool gates remained locked. And Kayla, once the star of Blue Sea, was left alone with her silence. She circled the tank with no rhythm, no purpose, just endless loops. Surface, breathe, dive, again and again. Some labeled her a threat, a dangerous animal that snapped, but others saw something different. They saw a prisoner, finally broken. One janitor who worked the night shift shared a moment that stayed with him forever. He found Kayla floating at the surface, still, motionless, her massive body barely moving as she stared at the bleachers, stared at the exact spot where Elise used to stand, smiling, waving, laughing. She just looked empty, he whispered, like she was waiting for someone who would never come back. Kayla refused food for days. She showed signs of stress, rubbing against the walls, chewing on metal gates. Veterinarians called it stereotypic behavior. But to those who had known her, it looked like mourning. Was she grieving Elise, or was she finally mourning herself? Elise Moreau didn't die because she was reckless. She didn't die because she lacked training. She died because the warning signs were drowned out by applause. Because people in power ignored the growing storm just beneath the surface. The truth is, she loved Kayla. She believed in their bond. But love isn't enough to stop a system built on captivity. And Kayla? She was never the villain. She was a victim of a steel cage, of a world that mistook obedience for peace, a world that called it entertainment while hiding the pain behind glass. Ask yourself, do we have the right to confine a 6,000-pound, intelligent, emotional being to a concrete pool just so we can clap at a backflip? How many more must suffer? How many more lives, both human and animal, must be lost before we admit something is deeply wrong? If Elise's story opened your eyes, don't let it end here. Let her legacy speak louder than the silence that followed her death. Comment below. Should orcas live in captivity? Let's have the hard conversations. Share this video, amplify the truth, and if you believe stories like this matter, the real, raw, and often uncomfortable truths, then subscribe, join us, because only when we understand can we begin to change. Elise didn't die in vain. She became a voice in the water. Now, it's your turn to listen.